Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Journalism Task Force's Women Running Things in Digital webinar. I am your moderator, Raisa Habersham. I'm a reporter with the Savannah Morning News, Vice President of Print for NABJ, and a member of the task force. Before I present to you our panelists, I want to introduce Amir Vera, our newly elected NABJ VP of Digital, for a few remarks. Amir.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Amir Vera, NABJ's VP of Digital. Thank you all for attending today's webinar where we highlight women in digital. This webinar is part of the Digital Task Force's effort to show NABJ members the different roles and faces that are in digital, as part of our monthly Workshop Wednesday workshop series. The Digital Task Force Advisory Committee created this workshop to emphasize the diverse faces in the digital space. Once again, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks, Raisa.
Thank you, Amir. Just a quick reminder to viewers, you can submit questions in our Q&A field. It will be monitored throughout the event. Now, on to our panelists. I will allow each of you to introduce yourselves briefly, starting with Anika Palm, Director of Off Platforms for CNN Digital.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anika Palm. I am the Director of off-platform and new audiences programming at CNN Digital. That means I have a pretty wide variety of functions that live under me, including everything from newsletters to push alerts to social media. And also our third-party partner platforms like Apple News and Google News. So there are a lot of things that the people on my team handle, and we are part of the larger global programming team at CNN.
Thank you, Anika. Next, we have Brianna Tucker, Deputy Editor at The Washington Post.
Hey everyone, yes, my name is Brianna Tucker. I'm a deputy editor at The Washington Post, specifically on the 202 newsletter teams, which are our policy coverage from everything on the Hill, including health, cybersecurity, tech, and our newest one, climate. And specifically, I helm the early, which is our political coverage. It's our flagship leadership morning newsletter that The Washington Post does. And in addition to that role, I have another side as a manager as well. So that's our staffing and kind of digital strategy between our newsletters and online presence, and then our hiring as well for our reporters and researchers.
Thank you, Brianna. And last, but certainly not least, Joni Vasiliades, VP of Digital for Tegna.
Thanks, Raisa. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Joni. I work for Tegna, which, if you're not familiar with Tegna, we have 49 local newsrooms across the country. So I've been working for our corporate content team for about 5 years now. But before that, I was the digital director at WUSA, which is the CBS affiliate in DC. In my current role, I support those 49 newsrooms in all things digital. So that includes their sites, their apps, streaming, social media. So I get to work with all the great journalists that we have around the country. I also work on our inclusive journalism program, which I co-lead with a few other folks on the content team. And that initiative, includes training and action planning and auditing of our content.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you all panelists for joining us this evening. I'll go ahead and jump right into it. I know that some of you didn't start in digital initially. Can you talk a bit about your career trajectory and what led you to transition into a digital role? We'll start with you, Anika.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question. A lot of times when you talk to journalists, you meet people who have always wanted to be journalists, and I am not that person. I did not grow up wanting to be a journalist. I grew up wanting to be rich. So I wanted to be actually either a stockbroker or a spy. Those were my goals when I was a kid. And after college, I started working for a mutual fund company because I thought it would give me some experience in finance, and I hated it. But while I was there, I got the opportunity to spend some time writing, which was really good. They saw that I had, some interest in explaining things to people. And so I started working on newsletters there. That was my first newsletter experience. And from there, I transitioned into a reporting assistant role and then reporting. And along the way, after spending several years as a reporter at various outfits, I started looking around and thinking, what looks interesting to me? And the news organization that I was working for at the time was, this was pre-iPhone, you guys, so it was a long time ago. The news organization I was working for was still literally text messaging people. This was before news organizations really had apps. And I had a lot of opinions about what they were doing with the way that the content was being distributed. And I figured it wouldn't hurt anything for me to start sharing those opinions about how they were doing that. So that somehow led me to becoming a homepage editor, which was a relatively new position back then. And from there, I really started to develop my ideas about content distribution, digital content distribution, obviously. And it led me along a path that got me to CNN initially. And I've been there 7 years. I came to CNN as a homepage editor and then just moved. I started thinking about what happens with all the content that we are putting out there that we don't, on places that we don't own. So I wanted to be involved in that. And I sort of talked myself into a job. And from there, it's a whole team. It started out as just me, but now it's a team. And so it's been a really interesting journey.
I love it. I love the assertiveness with which you use to get those jobs too and speaking up. Brianna, I'm going to kick it to you. Can you tell us just a little bit about your career trajectory and what led you to digital?
Yeah, so my story is quite the opposite. I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I majored in journalism in undergrad. Even in like childhood, I was that kid that chose to do a newsletter or a written project over anything else. So this has always been my goal. But I started my career actually at the Chronicle of Higher Education. It was one of those, you get a job in journalism, you just take it, right? So you want to get your footing. I took that job and was super grateful. It wasn't necessarily the coverage that I loved, but I did find that in covering higher education, I really had a passion for stories that were around race, or at least at the intersection of race. And I started chasing more stories that were particularly about policy and politics and how it affects people of color. During my time there, I think I wanted more opportunities, of course. I was really, really ambitious. I had a lot of ideas, but you start out young. So I had my first kind of page was in a newsletter. That was like where I was getting my first like bylines, where I was getting more coverage and visibility. And through that and kind of my passion for reporting there, I applied for my next job, which was with the BTC, and that was political. And I was a total newcomer. I did not have a handle on politics. It was totally new to me, but I was doing what I loved. And I realized that in that digital space and in that newsletter space, I liked the community and I liked kind of owning this audience and having, loyal readers that are with you and want to know just as much about what's going on the Hill as what you might have eaten today. So that's kind of where I kept going in the digital space and really just kept trying things. I kept opening my eye to different, wearing different hats and kind of figuring out what I liked and also what I was good at, and then sharpening my knowledge on the subject matter.
I love that. Thank you. Joni, what about you?
I think I've been a digital gal my whole career. So I studied broadcast journalism and, I was deciding what type of jobs I wanted and just thought, okay, I get my news online. So I think maybe I want to do jobs where we deliver news online. Like Brianna, I knew I wanted to be a journalist, but I don't think until I was applying to jobs, all throughout college, I thought I want to do this broadcast thing. And then when I was applying to jobs, I thought, I think I want to apply to digital journalist jobs because I think there's a big future there and a lot of growth opportunity, and a space that I can contribute in. So what I did is I found a digital job in a legacy broadcast organization. And so I started as a digital producer and then kind of worked my way through management to become digital director. And then eventually I moved over, like I said before, to our corporate office. So I've spent my whole career in Gannett/Tegna. It's now Tegna. It used to be Gannett, which has been a great experience for me. And it's a digital job in an organization that built its foundation in broadcast. So it's a nice challenge, and it's always, you're always learning something new, you're stretching, you're trying to learn and unlearn, and look at workflows and how do you operationalize digital. And I like that a lot, right? I like looking at the workflows that are keeping us in the past and figuring out how we can move into the future, because I think that workflow makes a huge impact on product. And so it's an interesting, challenging space to work in, but I love it a lot.
Thank you for that. I love that you brought up challenges, because I think that each of you noted that you wanted a challenge in your career field. Starting with you, Anika, if you could talk briefly just about maybe some of the challenges that you face working toward, your digital role and how you overcame it.
So early in my career, I had to face sometimes people not trusting that I had the knowledge that I knew I had. And that may have been a function of any number of things, from my, at the time, youth, to my race, to my gender. It could have been anything. It could have just been they didn't like the way I talked. So that was something that was, an issue early on. I have had to, just sort of functionally have had to get a really good understanding of how to talk with product, talk with tech folks, because although I have I'm in a role where I interface with technology folks all the time, I am an editorial staffer. So I have to be able to translate between the two, because, my boss is an editorial person and I'm dealing with product, most of my day. So that's a challenge that early on, when I first started getting into digital, was something that made something that made a difference for me.
No, I love that you mentioned that, a lot of people come in thinking there are preconceived notions about you and you having to overcome that. Brianna, can you talk just about some challenges that you face, working towards your digital role and how you overcame it?
Yeah, I think for me, especially at where I'm at this point in my career, I think something I've always faced is a little bit of imposter syndrome, to be honest. And also a little bit what Anika said, as far as kind of people maybe doubting your abilities or not necessarily giving you the space and the opportunity to prove what you actually know. I've always usually been the youngest in the room or the youngest in the team, or someone who perhaps on paper seems to have the least experience, but the type of experience is completely different than many of my colleagues and many of my peers. So I think that's something you mentally have to almost ignore. You kind of have to just go in and really have the confidence that you know what you're talking about, that you are also staying abreast of the topics and the subject matter day in and day out. And sometimes it feels like you're proving yourself every single day. And that is kind of how it has felt for most of my career, proving myself every single day, day in and out. But, the work has paid off, and it's evident that, that you're qualified to do the job.
Thank you. And Joni, for you, what challenges have you faced working in the digital space? Because you've done it since you've started. And, how did you overcome it?
Okay, I sense a theme here of imposter syndrome. So Brianna said it, but it's real. I think especially not everywhere. So, you know, people who work in digital are not monolithic, but there are a lot of us who are younger and are in larger positions at a younger age. And I think for me, that was always challenging because I questioned, you know, are people going to take me seriously with what I have to say in this meeting? Because I haven't worked in 15 different newsrooms and I don't have 3 decades of experience. And I think I've had to learn this balance of having a lot of faith in your own abilities and also having a lot of respect and empathy for the other perspectives who do appreciate legacy. Like, I think there's room for all of those different points of view. And I learned that, you know, a lot of the worry that I had was not coming from my peers, my colleagues, my bosses. It was coming from myself and just how, you know, I was conditioned. But I've had a really supportive team, yet somehow I still saw specifically my youth as a barrier or a weakness. And then I had great people around me who helped to show me that it's a strength, it's an advantage. We're trying to reach a younger audience. I'm more representative of that audience, but I did have to battle that personally. I still have days where I do. I think that it's no secret that no matter what level you are, a lot of people still battle that imposter syndrome. But someone once told me, companies are businesses and they're not giving away positions because they want to be nice and you're not qualified, right? They are going to hire you because you're qualified. They believe in you, so believe in yourself. And so I try to remind myself of that I'm not in this job because someone wanted to give me a handout. I'm in this job because I'm bringing value to the company. And I tell myself that on days where I'm feeling a little bit like, should I be doing this? Do I know what to say? And then I also think more in the broadcast space where I work, it's also just been a challenge to change language, to introduce new platforms and understanding for that. And I think anyone who works in a newsroom that was not traditionally a digital pure play newsroom, but was print or broadcast, they've probably faced similar challenges. And you have to be resilient and you have to have a lot of empathy for different perspectives, right? People who don't understand digital, a lot of times it's not because they don't want to, it's because their day is so full with other deadlines or because they kind of fear the unknown. And so I think if we come from a place of we're all on the same team, we're all trying to get it, but we're not naturally programmed to think of digital first, or we have a lot of workflows that are holding us back. And we have more of an appreciation of what perspective people are bringing to the table, what fears they might have. We make a lot more progress than just being frustrated or feeling like they're not into digital. That's usually not the case.
I'm glad you touched on that, you know, because I think all of you touched on the same point of imposter syndrome, but also this ageism factor of people viewing you all as not worthy of being in the newsroom yet. And also touching on the fact that some people just don't grasp digital yet. How do you navigate a newsroom in which seasoned journalists are either unwilling or are having difficulties understanding the digital space that we now live in?
So I can start with that one. At this point, particularly where we are at CNN, it's really a matter of understanding it. You don't really have a choice. So when I'm dealing with our content partners, they don't have a choice. This is what they're going to do. And they can work with our team to make sure that we get their content on all the platforms, you know, as effectively as possible, or nobody will see what they do. So I think the industry is in a place where people have to have some sort of base level of understanding of digital. That's just what it is now.
I can add on that, especially I think for the Washington Post and all the reporters that we have on our team, they all really want to be the best. They really want to not just look at ourselves and our placement, but they look at our competitors almost every day. And we know that digital is the way to do it, especially in newsletters. So whether we're, the way that we cross post on social media matters. The way that we write our newsletters down and we go through our metrics with our reporters and talk about it, that matters. Even the content, as far as just the editorial side, that matters to who we hire and their experience, and if they have a social visibility, and that matters. So I totally agree. It's kind of, you don't really have a choice to be successful in the newsroom, to be successful in digital. You just have to do it. And I'm grateful that we have such a variety of experiences where everyone is learning from each other. There are things that I still do not know work on, like TikTok, but apparently are really popular with certain people when it comes to how they get their news. And I'm just learning still all these new platforms, but there's things that even, more veteran reporters who are much more seasoned and much more experienced, they're just as open to learning these tools and these platforms and how they can expand their audience and how they can be better storytellers. So I'm grateful that most people are open-minded in that sense, that they want to be better and they want to innovate and see how they can share these stories in a better and more compelling and informing way.
I think that the way that you persuade people or the way that you upskill people is not one size fits all. And so you have to have a lot of patience and be a little versatile with your approach, right? You have an entire newsroom with people who learn in different ways and communicate in different ways. And so for some people, when you're talking about a big digital initiative, you can do it in a newsroom meeting and they get it and they're off to the races. And with other people, you need to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation. With a lot of people, you can use metrics to motivate, as Brianna was talking about, but it's, you have to be a people person to persuade people. You have to be able to read, how is this person going to learn? How am I going to win over their heart and mind? Where do they need coaching? Are they maybe afraid to ask questions in a group meeting, but if I pull them aside on a one-on-one, they're more comfortable? So I think there's a lot of these people skills and management skills that come with being an advocate for digital and a teacher for digital in your room. I also think that I will admit that my approach to how to move the newsroom into digital has changed over the years. I used to think this is a long time ago, everybody has to write a digital story every single day and file it by a certain time and no exceptions. And I changed my approach to which stories in our editorial meeting are the most winnable for us on digital. And let me work with those individual reporters because we know there's an audience opportunity. And then maybe if I'm not asking them every single day, because by the way, they have to shoot their story, edit their story, set up this interview, they have a list of stuff they want to do. And that's where that empathy comes in, understanding what else is going on in their job. And I was a little bit more strategic. Okay, today you get a break because that story, we don't need it on digital right away. It'll still perform really well for us in 6 hours versus, hey, Joni, today your story is a huge opportunity on digital. It's a great way to get your story in front of more people. So not being afraid to change your approach and learn from what works and what doesn't, and understand that people have these big, busy jobs that you have to kind of sometimes work against. And instead of feeling you're working against them, how do you work within them?
Thank you for that, Joni. I think this kind of segues into my next question just a little bit. I wanted to know, could each of you talk about just some of the challenges you're facing in your current role as women of color? Because I think you brought up a good point about not working against them, not working with them, and really kind of walking that line of making sure that all people are heard and that you're not, I guess, feeling like you're giving off a certain impression. And maybe you do take that off, but just if you can speak to some of the challenges you face as women of color in your current role, starting with Anika, that'd be great.
Sure. I am actually really, really lucky right now in my career. My boss, Marcus Mabry, who has been on multiple NABJ panels, is both a Black man and a member of the LGBTQ community. And he prioritizes diversity in his team, diversity in thought, and has really worked really hard to clear the way for those of us who are leaders on his team. And so I feel super, super lucky to be a part of the global programming team. We are the most, for example, the most diverse team within CNN. And we are also, we like to think, and actually metrics will show that we are the best in the world at what we do, not the country, the world. So I think that we are, he's been especially good about making sure that that has been the case for us. I think also at CNN, because CNN is based in Atlanta, the employee base is different than it might be in some other parts of the country. So the challenges that I face are sort of general management challenges, particularly in the climate we're in right now, with regard to people trying to figure out what they're doing with their lives during the pandemic, and some of the changes that we've had to make thinking about where we're going. I spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. That's my job. So that is taking up a lot of my time as well. So the challenges aren't necessarily due to me being a woman of color. I've certainly had those in other times in my career, but not right now.
Thank you. What about you, Brianna?
Yes, I would agree. Most of my challenges right now are related to being a newer manager. I think on the management side, especially in journalism, when it comes to bringing in more reporters and more editors of color, that I take a personal responsibility to make sure that our newsroom is diverse, but it's also something that is an initiative of our own newsroom. So when I'm ever, on panels like this, I'm trying to make sure that I'm building these relationships and building these pipelines so that people within the organization and outside of it get these opportunities. And it can be a little bit difficult, I have to say, because there's a lot of people out there, and especially on certain things like the editor track. And I'm trying to build more editors who are into our coverage, more people of color who are into that coverage, and reaching out to them. It's something that I haven't had to do in my previous roles because I wasn't a manager. And now I'm kind of seeing the flip side of that and having to handle it. So it's a little bit new for me. I would say certain challenges that I had faced a lot more often, not necessarily in this role, but definitely in my first job, was being the only Black woman on my team, the only person who was Black on my team, the youngest person on the team. And it was a struggle. There were things that I saw that I, knew right is right and wrong is wrong. And it's kind of hard to speak up when you're the young person in the room, or, it takes a lot of guts as a young reporter to say, hey, I don't think that, this story or this coverage, et cetera, to someone who's fit in their 50s or 60s, they've been doing this for 30 years. So it takes a lot of guts to speak up on those types of things. And you do question yourself if you're wrong, or if you should be saying anything at all. Is this the right time to say something? But I'm grateful that that thinking that I had back then was always right, because I've still been thinking the same way in the coverage. I've been thinking the same way when I look in the newsroom and I see, where people are sitting, where the placement is, or whether or not, who's on what levels and what offices. And I'm grateful that I'm in this position now to right some of the wrongs that I saw so early in my career.
Yeah, I'll start by saying I have a lot of privilege, right? And I'm in a position also that affords me a lot of privilege and a lot of power within the organization. And so my challenge is making sure that I use that in a way that creates equity. And it is a lot of pressure to feel like you want to do right by all of our journalists of color in this huge organization who are dealing with real issues. And it's a lot. And I want to make space for everyone, and I want to move fast, and I want to weed out the bad things and the bad apples. And it's a lot to take on, but I have a great team that's very supportive of that. But I definitely have days where I'm thinking, am I moving fast enough to help these journalists? Do they feel supported? Have I circled back on a conversation that we had? Have these lists of things that we want to do to not just improve my organization, but the industry, because we've done a lot of bad stuff. And we have a lot to make up for in terms of our lack of representation in management, the way we cover crime, the language that we use. I mean, there's a list, and I think we all just have to acknowledge that, accept it, and do something about it. But my biggest challenge right now is there's just so much on the table, and it all feels really urgent. And I feel a lot of pressure to show up for our journalists. And so yeah, I think I'm doing the best I can, but I always want to do better. So I would also say one challenge that I think it does disproportionately impact women, and the whole country is going through it right now, is just like, how do work and life intersect, and your mental health. And a lot of people who have the skills that we need for digital journalists, they also have skills that healthcare companies and technology companies, and they all want them to run their digital and social, and they can offer them a 9-to-5 job, and they don't have to work holidays, and they can have a better work life. And so a big challenge is, how do we make our industry, which is so important, a more desirable place to work? If we cannot pay as much as this sexy PR firm, or if we cannot give you holidays off, are we creating a space where you feel like you're really included? Do we have a mission that you feel really connected to, that makes you want to show up to work every day? Are we getting more creative with schedules, like scheduling people 4 days a week for 10 hours instead of 5 days a week? Are we incorporating remote work? All of these things are challenges that we need to do so that we make our jobs more appealing and more competitive, and women feel like they can still work and they can still accomplish the things that they need to do, that they want to do for their families, or that if we have, I know there are questions about the pay inequity between digital and other jobs, like I see them coming in, so I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but how do we compensate as we're righting that wrong? How do we compensate in other ways? Those are all challenges too that I think are really big right now, we're not post-pandemic, but where we are.
Thank you so much for that, Joni. You touched on a lot, and I know that there are questions in the chat. We'll get to those. But thank you both, all of you, for your answers. I think you touched on some issues and concerns that people are facing throughout their careers. So I really appreciate that. We're going to jump to the questions in the chat. I'm going to start with this one question from Brittany Reese. This person asked, what keeps you motivated, and how do you find jobs that actually paid a living wage? And Anika, if you want to start.
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking about it as I was moving to unmute myself. So what keeps me motivated is the through line that I've had throughout my career, getting content in front of people who need to see it, or don't know yet that they need or want to see it. So that's been a through line in my career. And I am also, at this point in my career, also motivated by seeing people who are trying to help shape other people's careers. So that's an important thing too. With regard to a living wage, I understand that question. I started out in local journalism. It was not well paid, and I probably stayed in local journalism a little longer than I should have. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And there is no answer that works for everybody. I think that there are ways that you can shift from, if you are in editorial, if you can find a way to move into the product side, the salaries there are a little bit higher. So that's something that you can do if you are intent on staying in local journalism. With regard to other types of positions, I would recommend learning as much as you can about the various platforms and about various CMSs and that sort of thing, so that you have the knowledge base that employers that are larger but still in the industry are looking for. It is hard. I do not have a good answer for you, but you can please keep trying. We need you. I am hiring in my team. I have 4 positions open. One is actually in London. So for these purposes, let's say I have 3 positions open. You can go to warnermediacareers.com and look up social producer. They're there. Please apply. Anyone who has professional social media experience, please do apply.
Thank you, Anika. Brianna or Joni, do either of you want to take a stab at that question? I can repeat it as well if you need me to.
Yeah, what was the question again?
What keeps you motivated, and how do you find jobs that actually paid a living wage?
Yeah. So for me, being in politics coverage, the one thing I think that has always kept me motivated is a lot towards what Anika said, as far as making sure that the content in the news is getting in front of the people that it needs to get in front of. From day one, I was extremely passionate about making sure that people of color understood politics. It's a very white, very old, very male landscape in the coverage, but also in the elected officials. And I really wanted to make sure that people like myself, young people who maybe were interested in it but didn't necessarily have a footing, the news that I was a part of wasn't hiding the ball from people, that people were involved in the news, that they were not just spectators, that they were actually consuming it and doing something with that it changed the way that they maybe went about their day. And I think the one thing that pulled me into newsletters and motivated me in that way is that the community that you build is an opt-in network, right? People want to be a part of that. People are subscribing to it. And for me, the day in and day out, every day when I publish, one of all our 7 newsletters, is that the news needs to be scoopy and exclusive to insiders, but it still needs to make outsiders, I guess you could say outsiders, feel welcome. They still need to make sure that they feel like they're learning something, that they're getting something from this that they wouldn't get from any other coverage that we have at the Post. And to the point about earning a living wage, man, I feel you on this one. I'm so sorry. I don't have a perfect answer, because it upsets me the way that, some of these internships go, where you feel like you have to put down a down payment on your future of doing all this work and earning like pocket land. I feel so bad, but like I had to do the same thing in college, and it's not fun. And I'm only fortunate that my parents, were in the area where I could live at home for my first job, because I don't know how I would have made it in this industry. I really don't. And I will say that I really made the most of what I could. I mean, I worked so many hours. I was doing like 18-hour days some days. I was learning everything I could and wearing all the hats, from being the social media manager to on the Hill to reporting to writing to editing my own stories. Sometimes I didn't have an editor some days that had time to look at my own stories. So I had to make sure that, when I'm writing, it looks like it's good and ready to go, as if no one will ever read it again. It has to be perfect. I met with so many people. I reached out to so many, people who were former mentors. I've talked to people who were sponsors. I talked to people who were in the industries that I wanted to be in, and made sure that my name was out there and my network was growing every day, so that if in case something came up or there was an opportunity, somebody thought of me. Somebody's thought of, hey, I do actually know somebody who's in this position and is looking for this. Or, hey, I know someone actually, I just met the other day or last week or at this, conference, who has said she was interested in this. Maybe I should reach out with her to this opportunity. And kind of keeping all these little webs of connected ideas and jobs and opportunities at bay, and close and building those relationships so that when the time came, it wasn't, I know 0 people at this company, or I know 0 people at, this organization for me to get my foot in the door and ask questions like, hey, what do you think the wage is here? Because those questions matter when you have that inside person and you can ask them, hey, like, what do you think people are getting paid at for this role? Because you can't ask the hiring manager sometimes. So you are able to ask someone who's already working there. So I would say really, really build up that toolbox. Really make sure you have got all the skills. You are marketing yourself. You have your name out there. You are building those relationships, nurturing them. It can't just be take. It has to be give too. And keeping yourself in a good light as well. And I know it's really hard, especially as a new college graduate, but please keep your head up because there are plenty of opportunities out there. There are plenty of people like myself and Anika and Joni, I'm sure, who are hiring and looking for talent and constantly trying to feed the pipeline up of young, bright people in media and digital. So please keep your head up.
Thank you, Brianna. I like that you touched on Whisper networks because those do come in handy when you're looking for a job. Call up somebody who works there or used to work there and figure out what the lay of the land is or was when they were there. Joni, I can repeat the question for you as well.
I'm good. Okay. So what keeps me motivated? I'll start there. So when I was working directly in a newsroom, it was the product. I'm a producer at heart and I love putting out a good product, feeling like I'm doing right by our audience. Now it is 100% the people that I work with. It is making an impact on people's careers, making their job better and more enjoyable, solving problems together. It's all the people that I work with, my bosses, my peers, and especially the people who are just getting started or want to grow into management. I love that part of my job. And right now I'm very motivated around this topic of making your job a thing that you love and being able to afford your bills, right? So this question I'm very passionate about as well. And I think, so if you think about digital jobs and how they came about in like a CNN or a Tegna or probably a Post too, because our legacy is in something else. It's in print or it's in broadcast. And so from my experience in Tegna, how did a digital job start? Well, it was just like, who in the room knows how to do a little bit of a website and how can we take our other content and put it on there? And we don't really have budget for this position. And then, we need a little bit more, like we'll move the intern into this role, or we'll get someone who knows how to tweet and is 20 years old. And so the pay that came along with that is very low salary, right? And so the way that we didn't anticipate enough, digital is not just like a job that you can scrape your leftovers into and hire people without experience. Digital is a huge, important, enormous space. And you need really strong journalists there. You need people who have great editorial and ethical decision-making, great writers, and you need to pay accordingly, but that's not what happened. So then we have all these salaries that are lower than some other positions and it's not right. And now we need to course correct, but course correction takes time. You can't snap your fingers and raise pay for thousands of employees, but what you can do as a manager is get creative. As someone who leads a newsroom, what we can say is, okay, I have an opening here and this position made X amount of money. Do I want to just fill it or do I need to reallocate part of that budget into new spaces like digital? So seeing every opening as an opportunity for any managers who are out there is really, really important. For anyone who doesn't have this influence, I'll tell you something that if anyone from Tegna is listening, please don't get mad at me. I know people are successful at getting, I'm not saying in my company, I'm saying in general, getting better pay when you have another offer on the table. If you are super valuable, you have negotiating power and you are a star, companies will pay for their stars. And I'm not saying that they're going to give you some crazy amount of money because it's really hard to pull that out, but they don't want to lose you and we can get creative. And so I had an experience where I had another offer on the table a long, long, long time ago in my career. And it helped me have the confidence to ask for more. But I also had to be prepared if they couldn't give me a salary that I thought was appropriate to take the other offer, right? If you're going to use that, you need to be prepared for your company to say, we can't do that and to walk, or you just need to know what you're willing to accept. But I do think that that's a tactic that is effective. I will also say that if you are, just coming out of college and trying to decide who you want to work for, pay is one thing that's going to impact, how, if you can afford your life, but another thing are your benefits. And so it's a space that you should look at in your employer. One thing I love about my company is we offer like all these free mental health services. They just increase benefits for family planning, like, fertility treatment, adoption, and that's real money. That if you're in that situation makes a big difference. Does your employer contribute to your 401k? Do they contribute to your HSA? All of those things, which don't show up in your salary, show up in your pocket in other ways. And they're things that I definitely was not looking at when I just graduated college, but I would tell people to look at now.
Thank you for that, Joni. That's really good advice, because I don't think that that's something people consider when they're negotiating its benefits. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. This one question that we have, it's from Nick, and I apologize if I mispronounce you all's names, Nikita Dennis. This person asks, what would you recommend for a reporter looking to transition to digital and wanting to apply for a digital position? And they ask for any resume recommendations. Anika, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I'd recommend is taking some baby steps. So if you are a reporter who wants to transition to digital, I would maybe look at figuring out what you can do with the content that you're already putting out. Can you put together a special project or an interactive and actually program that interactive or special project or design it yourself? That's a baby step that'll get you closer to doing the kind of work that producers do in digital. So those kinds of things are a good start. I would also try to find a digital producer in your newsroom or a social producer or something like that you can sit with just for an hour, shadow them, figure out what it is that they do and whether or not it really is something that you're interested in. If once you've done that, and if you've decided that it's something that you want to move forward with, ask if you can maybe job share is not the right term, but you could do that job one day a week, or do it one day a month, something like that, so that you can get a little more experience. Experience really, really helps when you're applying for these jobs. Learn the platforms that they're using, learn the dashboards that they're using, the CMSs. Those will help you get a little bit further along. But I also, before I finish here, I also don't want to make it seem like all you have to do is spend your time learning. You already have some of the knowledge that you need to do this kind of work. Don't sell yourself short. Your work already exists in some form on the internet, so you already have a digital portfolio. Think about ways that you can enhance that, and think about ways that you can show that you are forward thinking about what's happening both within your newsroom and within the industry at large.
Thank you for that, Anika. I appreciate it. Brianna, do you need to repeat the question again?
I know. I'm sorry. I got lost. She has such a good answer.
The question is, what would you recommend for a reporter looking forward to transition into digital and apply for a digital position?
Ooh, okay. I would say, along with the training and learning and making sure that you get someone that you could possibly shadow and ask them all the questions that you want in that role, the person who has maybe the role that you want or a role similar to that. I would look a little inward too and figure out how you are uniquely equipped to do that job with the skill set you currently have. What is different about your experience as a reporter, maybe in broadcast, moving to print or online media that no one else on that particular team or in that role might necessarily have. That is an advantage. Don't count yourself out. That could be something. Maybe you have a specific skill set in coverage. Maybe you have a really good way of coordinating your video with your stories. Maybe you have a really unique way of looking at ideas and questions and how you interview people that might be a little bit different than someone who's been just writing or maybe just doing a lot more calls in their life. I would look a lot inward into that experience as well and sell yourself on that. I also recommend, to transition to digital. I will say, I think newsrooms, as much as you might feel like you might not know certain platforms or things like that, it is helpful if you already have it. But I think once hired too, you will get training. You will get trained on these systems. You will get, some sort of instruction on how to move and transition these things versus if you just have, zero knowledge of what's going on. But if you have a CMS experience, you can move to something else. If you have worked with even, I would say, like any email platform or marketing platform, that you should be able to move into that newsroom's platform and have an understanding of it. If you have even a general understanding of SEO, that is like the gold standard in digital. If you understand that and recognizing what the keys are in digital and focusing on those things, not a lot of, I would say, our reporters and editors have a broad knowledge on SEO and different metrics and how things line up as far as the reach of our audience and our stories. Like the digital engagement part of it is a lot to learn for reporters and editors. And I don't think that's something that, reporters necessarily focus on. But if you could demonstrate things like that and those skill sets, it sets you apart.
Yeah, I had one of our newsrooms. I was talking to a digital director. She has an open digital position, and she has some internal candidates. And she said, "I'm going to see who shows up to the SEO training in 2 weeks, and that'll tell me who really means it." So it's exactly what you, Anika and Brianna have said. They want to see interest. But the good news is, I really believe that if you are a strong journalist, you have the capacity to be a strong digital journalist, because I think just like in, other reporter jobs, broadcast or print, the things that are hardest to teach are great ethics, great editorial judgment, great writing. And those are all things that you need in digital. I think the things that are easier to teach are SEO and how to post on social and how to understand analytics and how to, use headline testing tools. So I would like to see more traditional journalists coming over to digital. I think organizations need to have more tracks for people who were in a broadcast or a print role to learn digital. I think you should seek out organizations that have lots of training opportunities and lots of development opportunities. But the good news is that's what I'm looking to hire, is people who are great journalists and who want to grow in digital. There's plenty of room and plenty of jobs out there. And so I add that, but I agree with the other women on this panel that, show an interest and really mean it. And I guarantee you the digital manager in your newsroom, if you said, "I'm really interested in digital," is going to say, "That's awesome. Come sit in on this training, come learn our CMS." So I think it's just a matter of saying what you want and then taking any training or development opportunity that's there for you.
Thank you, Joni. One final question before we head into closing remarks. Are there any resources, tools, or books that you all used to help you grow throughout your career outside of just experience?
Another interesting question. I'm currently tearing through a bunch of management books. So, I look through those kinds of books right now because that's something that helps me. I can't say that there was a particular resource that helped me get into the field in the way that I am right now, or that helped me as I was moving along, but just having a broad broad interests and trying to make sure that you're on top of what's happening in the industry really will get you pretty far.
Thank you, Brianna.
Oh man, I have to say the same. I think depending on what your maybe subject matter or your beat is right now, or where you want to be in digital, I think reading is, I read so much of everything, not just the other news stories and coverage, how I'm covering things. I've read even different, when you're figuring it out and you're young in your 20s, what you want to do with your career and kind of narrow it down. I think the resources and tools that you'll find are in communities just like this. They're in NABJ, they're in Journalists of Color, they're in, NAHJ, they're in IRE, they're in ACEs. I'm trying to think of all the organizations that are in there. They're in the IWL Society. These are your resources and your tools and your people that you should be talking to. And you should, do not be afraid to shoot a shot, shoot a DM and ask a question personally. I'll be there to help. But I think you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. So keeping an open mind and constantly being engaged with things, engaged with people, but also engaged with subject matters that are inside and outside of your career is what's going to help you get ahead and help you set yourself apart. I think especially for me, when I was new in politics and I only had, my state politics knowledge and trying to go to national politics coverage, I immersed myself in everything from what apps people were using to what platforms to what type of, sources to figuring out, I went from voice memos to Otter. I finally figured that out. I just expanded my knowledge as much as I could. And I think, resources like this one, ask questions, just keep asking questions and people will give you the answers.
Thank you, Brianna. Joni?
Yeah, I think number one is the people that I've worked with. They teach you who you want to be as a leader and who you don't want to be as a leader. You can learn a lot of things from great people and a lot of things from people that you just haven't hit it off with. So I think for me, some of the people that I really admire have taught me more than any book that I've read or any podcast that I've listened to. Not that those aren't valuable, but to me, it's been the people that I surround myself with for sure. I am really bad at networking. I one time had a performance review that was like, get yourself out there. And I said, okay, I'm going to work on it. I'm just so focused on internally in our organization. So I'm really happy to be joining these panels and meeting more people. Have been doing that more in the past couple of years, and trying to leverage different communities like this. So yes, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. This is very taboo to say, but I don't really use a lot of social media personally. I'm too busy on social media for work. So I haven't tweeted since 2000. So don't follow me on Twitter. LinkedIn's a place to find me. And I'm happy to chat with you and be a resource because like I said in an earlier question, that really is what motivates me today. It's people, it's making our industry a place where people can grow and where people want to work. I wish that was my full-time job. It is my full-time job, honestly, because when you're in a digital leadership position, that's what you should be thinking about. You should be thinking about how to grow people in this field. So I would be happy to connect on LinkedIn and chat, whether it's about Tegna or just careers in general in this industry.
Thank you, Joni. And thank you, Anika and Brianna, too. Thank you for your time today, for sharing your invaluable knowledge about the digital space. And thank you, viewers who tuned in to the Digital Journalism Task Force's Women Running Things in Digital's webinar. Before we close out, could each of our panelists let viewers know how they can reach you? We'll start with Joni. I know you touched on this.
So don't follow me on Twitter. Unless you want nothing in your feed. LinkedIn is the best. I check that regularly and would be happy to message with you.
Thank you. Anika, how can we get in contact with you?
So LinkedIn is probably best for me as well. You can, because social media is part of my job, I'm on all the platforms. That doesn't mean I post on all the platforms, but I'm there. So but you probably shouldn't message me on most of them, just LinkedIn, because I'm not going to look at my inboxes on Facebook and Instagram and all those others.
And Brianna.
Yep, I would say the same for me as well. LinkedIn is the best way. It's the most professional way to reach out. I am on Twitter for a quick question if that's the case, but LinkedIn is definitely best for me.
Thank you again for joining us this evening, and thank you all for attending. Amir, did you want to make any final remarks before we close out?
Yes, I changed shirts, as y'all can see, but I just wanted to thank y'all for joining us today. Thank you all to the panelists as well, and thank you for NABJ for helping us put this together.
Again, thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.